Hi and welcome back to another video in which I answer your questions about being a woman who is child-free by choice. That is, a woman who doesn't have kids, who doesn't want kids, and will never have kids. At all. Ever. None. I still find it's a topic that there is so much stigma around, so much misinformation around, and that's why I want to answer your questions in these videos and talk about my side of things, maybe help you guys understand a little bit more, and also just help destigmatize being child-free in general. I would also love to hear your answers to any of these questions down in the comments as well, so let's just jump into some of your questions. Our first question today is, how do you deal with people telling you you'll change your mind or saying things like, but you'd be such a good parent? This is a big question because these are things that I get told so much. Like when I released my poem Room, which is about being child-free by choice and about the reproductive rights of people who are assigned female at birth in general, one of the first comments I got from someone was, I think you're making the wrong choice. You'd be such a good parent, or something like that. And I was like, this is exactly why I made this poem. This comment here is everything wrong with the world. You can't tell someone that they're making the wrong choice about their own body. It's no one else's decision. And even though other people might think I'd be a good parent because they see me looking after my dog Kyra, and I'm very caring with her, and like I say, I've said this in other videos, but I'm very protective of kids in general. I want to make sure all kids are very looked after and very safe and cared for, but I know I could not look after a child myself. I simply couldn't. I don't enjoy it, I don't know how to safely look after a kid, I don't know any of the things that they need, and I have no interest in learning any of that stuff at all. I know I would not be a good parent, not only because I don't want to be a parent and because I don't know that stuff, but because I have my own issues that I can't just put aside while the kid needs me, you know? Being autistic, I have a lot of sensory issues, and they're often related to things like sound. I struggle a lot with loud noises and high-pitched noises, and sometimes I just need quiet spaces, I need dark spaces. I struggle a lot with textures and things like that, and that's one of the things I really can't deal with kids, is when they're messy or sticky or dirty. I physically cannot be near that. It's enough to cause like a full-on meltdown, and with the sound and everything it's bad. And when you know you're going to be around a person like that who is going to likely cause a meltdown, you can't look after them when you're in the middle of a meltdown. Like you simply cannot. And so it's not fair to put a kid in that position where I can't look after them. Do you know what I mean? So even though other people from the outside might be like, oh, but you'd be such a good parent, I'm like, yeah, but you don't actually know me, and I know I wouldn't. I couldn't give a kid everything they needed, and I think if you're going to bring a kid into the world, they need to be wanted, and they deserve the best possible life you can give them. And I simply can't do that for someone. As for the whole you'll change your mind thing, I just find it very patronizing, and it really annoys me. Because as I've said in other videos, people don't say that to parents. When someone announces their pregnancy, people don't turn around and say, oh, but you might change your mind. And I just think it's a bit of a ridiculous double standard. Chances are I'm not going to change my mind. I've not changed my mind my entire life so far, and I can't see myself doing it in the future. I just don't have that urge to have kids at all. It's not there, it's never been there, and I can't see anything changing to make it be there. And let's say I do change my mind. So what? That's my responsibility to deal with. I've made that decision, and I have to deal with the consequences of my actions, like anyone else making any decision ever. You know, when I chose this career, like, what if I changed my mind? Last time I quit my full-time job, what if I changed my mind? When I got a dog, what if I changed my mind? People can ask this about all sorts of things in life. And what if you do change your mind? Then you deal with it. Then you deal with those consequences. Then you keep on going and you try and do something to fix it. And you can change your mind back and all sorts of other stuff. It's exactly the same. But I don't think I'm going to change my mind. I think it's very unlikely I will. And I think the dangers involved of me not having children and then changing my mind or regretting it are much lower than me or someone else having a child and then changing my mind and regretting that. If you regret having a child, you are endangering someone else's life, you are causing someone else to have a lower quality of life, you're hurting the kid, you're hurting the father, you're hurting a lot of people. But if you choose not to have a kid and regret it, the only person who's hurting emotionally is yourself. And I think that's much lower risk. On to the whole topic around partners and stuff in general, and I got quite a few questions about this, and where should I start? Okay, let's go for this one. Advice for dating to find someone compatible. This is a big one, and this is something I struggled with for a hell of a long time, because I find that most men are more likely to be on the fence than to be adamantly child-free. And this is a thing that I really, really struggled with, because when they're on the fence, they can change their mind, and they likely do change their mind. And I think because men don't have the same, I guess, time restraints as women, and because men aren't the ones to have to go through pregnancy, they can be a lot more flippant about their decision to have kids or not. And they can just be like, oh, I'm on the fence, I'll see. If it happens, it happens. I don't know, maybe one day. Whereas with women in general, we have to be a little bit more decisive, you know, because we're the ones who'd be carrying the baby, we're the ones who have a smaller time frame to be pregnant. And yeah, I think it's something that we need to be a little bit more proactive in making decisions about, so it does bother me. Obviously, I'm speaking very generally here. It's going to be very different for very different people, and obviously this doesn't take into account the experiences of trans men and women and non-binary people. Obviously their experiences matter too. I just can't speak to that personally. But in general, for me, when I've dated someone who's a fence sitter, it's never ended well, because they usually end up changing their mind, or it ends in an argument, or they're like, oh, maybe you'll change your mind one day, oh, maybe we can do this one day. It's hard, because if they don't know what they're doing with their future, you can't build a future with them when you want something serious and long term, you know? If we both talk about how we picture the future, and theirs is like, oh, well, maybe I'll have a kid one day, and yours is like, well, in 10 years I want to be sat on a beach writing a book. You know what I mean? Like, you can't plan a future together, because you both want very different things and very diverging things. And I've been hurt a lot of times when I've fallen for someone only for them to turn around and say, actually, I want a kid, and then they go off and find someone they can impregnate. You know, that's really, really hurtful, and it kind of feels like they don't take you seriously as a partner. They just see you as someone to have fun with until they go and find their real partner. And that really, really hurts, and it causes a lot of insecurities and a lot of problems. So my way of dealing with that and fixing that was to say, no, I'm not dating any more fence sitters. No, not at all, I'm done. And only dating people who were completely child-free like me. That was a decision I had to make. And yes, it narrows your dating pool a lot, like a lot, but it made the quality of dates I went on a lot better, and it meant that I could actually find something real and something with substance and something that was going to work. So before I met my partner, I was seeing someone who was a bit of a fence sitter, and it was always this like worry in the back of my mind, because I was like, yeah, he's gonna leave me at some point if this works out. It was always like a thing. So I never could like commit to that guy. We couldn't commit to each other. It wasn't like a thing, because I mean, there were a lot of problems, but it was never gonna work out, because that big core value that was so important to me was something that he couldn't agree with me on. And then when I met my partner, it was actually one of the first things that we like discussed and spoke about, because I was talking about performing at Glastonbury and being child-free and stuff, and then we went out and got a drink together, and I think maybe I brought it up over drinks, I'm not sure, and I asked him, and I was petrified, because he'd been like, yeah, I'd like to see you again, let's go out on a proper date, this sort of thing, and I was like, oh god, I really like him, I think he's great. And I was like, ugh, and I just had to ask him, I'm like, where do you stand on the kids thing? He was like, yeah, I don't want them. I was like, oh my god, thank god. It was a scary thing, because I thought he was amazing and wonderful, and we clicked so well, and I thought he was beautiful, and we had so much in common, and I was so terrified he was going to tell me that he wanted kids, or he didn't know, or anything like that. But the minute he said he didn't want them, I was like, oh, thank god, okay, like, we can actually focus on seeing if we're going to work together now. Turns out he's pretty much perfect, and he's wonderful, and we both have a very similar idea of where we want our lives to go from here. We have a similar idea of what we want in the future. We want the same things from each other. We click together very well, and I have literally like no worries that he's going to leave me for someone he can go and impregnate, you know? There's literally no worries about that, because pregnancy is his worst nightmare and it's my worst nightmare, and we both want exactly the same things. And like I say, even though it really narrowed my dating pool, it was very important to do that, you know? Because being with the right person is much more important than being with a person. You're much better off being happy and content alone than being with the wrong person just because you want to be with someone, anyone, you know? So it's worth waiting to find someone who is on completely the same page as you, even if that takes longer and is more effort. That said, the great thing about being child-free is that we don't have any time restrictions, you know? It's not like some women where they're like, well, I need to get married by this age so I can have kids by this age and, you know, make sure I can pump out this many babies in this amount of time. There's no time restraints on us, so it is better waiting to find the right person who you're completely compatible with and giving it more time, because you do have your whole life ahead of you. And despite what people say, life doesn't just like end at 30. You could like wait until you're 40 and then find the right person then, or 50 or 60, and still have a crap ton of time together to build an amazing life together. And in the meantime, you're doing amazing stuff by yourself and living and building an amazing life by yourself, you know? Or maybe you have a series of short relationships, or I don't know, you could meet anyone at any time. It's worth waiting for the right person who you agree on those core values with, like being child-free, rather than settling for the wrong person and having to compromise and wasting each other's time, or compromising in ways that make one or both of you unhappy, or any number of things like that, you know? The next question is very similar and says, how did you approach having that conversation with your partner? And I did touch on this briefly in that last segment, but honestly, the way I've approached it with everyone, not just my partner now, but other people I've dated before him, is I've always been very, very open and upfront and just quite blunt with it, and just come out and said it either before the first date or on the first date. Like, I don't want children. I'm never having children. Where do you stand on that? And then going from there. And if people say they do want kids, I'm like, well, we're not going to work. Sorry, bye. And it's quite blunt, and it does make some men really angry. So I remember a while back now, and I think I've told this story on my channel before, but I was speaking to this one guy on Hinge, and he was absolutely stunning. He was beautiful, and he was really creative, and he was really funny. He seemed really intelligent, and I was like, oh god, this guy's amazing. We do click. This is lovely. And then out of nowhere, I asked him something like, oh, you know, so like, what have you been doing today? And he was like, blah blah blah, I did this, and I was working on this project. Oh, and childcare. And I was like, what do you mean childcare? He went, yeah, I had my 2 kids today. And I was like, kids? And he hadn't put on his profile that he had kids. He hadn't brought it up until that point. And I was like, what do you mean you have kids? And he was like, yeah, I've got a boy and a girl, blah, blah. It's amicable with the ex. I have them this many days a week. And he's telling me all this stuff. And I was like, oh, sorry, this isn't going to work. And I just like straight up was like, this isn't going to work. I had it on my dating profile, like one of the first things on there, saying like, I don't ever want kids, I'm child-free by choice, I want someone else who doesn't want kids, something like that. I worded it differently at different times, but I had it on there. It was one of the first things people saw. I made it a very prominent point of my profile, and this guy completely ignored it, and it really, really bothered me. And I was like, this isn't gonna work. And he got so angry with me, and he was like, oh, well, you know, they're my kids, they're not yours, you know. I'm like, I know, but if they're your kids and they're in your life and I'm in your life and you're in my life, then they're going to be in my life, and I don't want that. And he was like, oh, I'm not asking you to be like a parent to them. I'm like, good, but still don't want them in my life. And I was like, I don't understand why you'd match with me knowing I don't want kids. And he's like, well, I thought you didn't want your own kids, not someone else's. And I'm like, don't want any kids. None at all. And I want someone else who doesn't want kids. And he's like, well, I don't want any more. And I was like, yeah, but you still have them. You still wanted them at some point, and that isn't something we're going to align on. And then he started getting angry with me and calling me names and swearing at me. And he was like saying that I needed to lower my standards and that I'd be alone forever and I'd never find anyone like this. And I was like, that's fine. I would rather be alone than with someone with kids. And I think this is something you kind of have to get used to, and it is difficult. You know, no one likes being rejected for whatever reason, and taking that rejection is very, very hard, and rejecting someone is very, very hard, and it does bruise your ego, and it does make you feel bad, and it makes them feel bad, and it's not a very pleasant thing. But sometimes you just have to acknowledge we're not compatible. And as a child-free person, you also have to get used to people who want kids turning around to you and saying, sorry, we're not compatible, this isn't going to work. You know, it's not just a you rejecting them thing, they can reject you as well. But ultimately, it's the right decision. It's better than compromising and being unhappy and wasting everyone's time. You need to find someone who you align with, otherwise it's not really fair on anyone involved. So my advice is be very direct, ask questions, and go from there. There are plenty more people out there. The first person interested in you isn't your only option. You don't have to compromise to find the right person. It might take more looking, it might take more effort, but you can find someone who aligns with your values on being child-free or having kids, and who you click with in other ways. You know, there are people out there, don't worry. So be a little bit brutal, but be very blunt, be very honest, and never hide your feelings on the matter. The last question that I want to touch on is one that I think is really interesting and really good. And this person said, oftentimes the 30s, 40s, and 50s for women is advertised as the years when you're most occupied with motherhood. With motherhood out of the picture for you, what does your dream middle-aged years look like to you? What are your big plans? And I actually really like this question. I think it's nice, I think it's a bit of a positive one, and although I don't like the implication that 30s is middle age, I do like that my future doesn't include motherhood, and I think I have a really exciting future ahead of me. So I turn 30 in about 6 months, and honestly, I just feel like my life keeps getting better and better the older that I get, and I'm achieving everything that I want to. The older I get, the more financially stable I am, the better friends I have, the better my quality of life is, the more successful I am in my career, the more experiences I'm having, the more I'm learning, and I want to just keep doing that. So at the minute I'm writing a book. I've started performing my poetry. I performed at Glastonbury this year. Glastonbury, like that's incredible. One of the biggest festivals in the world, one of the most respected festivals in the world, and I performed there. It's amazing. And with not having kids in my life, I can continue to do these things. I can spend my time and money and effort on me and doing what's right for me and helping other people. So the next few years, I want to finish my book. I want to write more poetry. I want to perform more poetry. I want to take an acting class. I want to take some singing lessons. I want to travel the world a bit more because I could never do that when I was younger because I couldn't afford it. I want to maybe buy a house and like renovate it, or like I have this like dream of buying a big barn and making a big massive open plan living space just for me and just kind of like making it my own. I love that idea. I want to volunteer at some more animal shelters. I want to do more charity work. I want to keep donating money to Battersea Dogs Home like I do regularly, to mermaids like I do regularly, and breast cancer research is another one that I donate to quite regularly because it's important to me. I want to keep making art, I want to keep painting, I want to travel, I want to take photos, I want to go to gigs and see live music, I want to spend time with my friends, I want to keep creating stuff and making stuff and giving back to the world, and that's what I see for my future, and I see it being very, very fulfilling. I'm very happy with where my life is right now. And some days it's a little hard because like I have some health problems and stuff, and you know, things can be a little bit up and down and everything, but on the whole, I have a job that leaves me feeling very fulfilled. I have a lot of creative projects that I'm working on. I work very, very hard. I have the best friends I've ever had. I'm surrounded by some amazing people in my life. My Kyra is amazing and she makes me so happy. My partner is wonderful and I appreciate him a lot, and I think we have the potential to build a really amazing life together, and I'm just very happy with where things are at, and I like the idea of just continuing my life like this but growing and changing and evolving and getting better and better all the time, you know? So I'm very, very excited about the future, and I feel like if motherhood was in that, it would limit the things I want to do, it would limit my options, it would limit my potential, it would limit my output, and so for me, motherhood is limiting, whereas at the moment I have so much freedom and excitement ahead of me and I'm loving it, and that's what I want. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a nice idea about how positive it can be to be child-free by choice, about how exciting life can be when you're child-free by choice, and it reduces a little bit of the stigma around it, and I really just hope to normalise this a little bit more. But for now, thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of these questions and my answers down in the comments below. If you liked this video, please subscribe because I'll be making more in this series. I also make other videos on book reviews and video responses. I talk about feminism, atheism, pro-LGBT stuff, social issues, science, history, poetry, all sorts of fun stuff like that. So please subscribe if you're new here, I would really appreciate it. Leave a like, leave a comment, and share the video around social media if you liked it and want to spread the message of how great it can be to be child-free by choice and just help normalise the topic a little bit more. But for now, thank you for watching, I appreciate you a hell of a lot, and I'll see you again really, really soon.